Hey there, tubers. Today's video is going to be on the 600-hour service on my 2022 Bobcat CT5555 tractor. This one isn't too bad of a service. There's a lot of inspections and checks that you've got to do. You've got to change out the hydrostatic and the hydraulic and the fuel filter, but you don't change the engine oil or engine oil filter. And here's some of the tools that you'll need for it. We'll start with the filters. This is the fuel filter. It's a 7380039. The hydrostat filter is a 7002299, and the hydraulic filter is a 7379332. You'll also need some of this transmission differential fluid, because depending on how quick you are when you change the hydraulic filter here, as to how much fluid you're going to lose, because there is no stop in this system. So once you pull that filter off, it's just going to free flow right out of the hydraulic system. So if you're quick, you won't lose much, but if for some reason you get delayed, you could lose a lot of fluid. So depending on that will depend on how much fluid you actually need. You'll also need a torque wrench with a 24mm socket, a couple of 14mm wrenches, 22mm wrench, tape measure, and a filter wrench. And those will be the main things that you need. So let's look at the list here. I print out a copy of the service manual. I've ruined quite a few service manuals by getting oil on them, so now I just print out the pages and check it off as I go. So the first things you'll do is, since this is a 600 hour, you do everything that's divisible into that 600. So 10 is, 50 is, 100 is, 200 is. 400 isn't, so you don't have to do any of the 400 hour stuff. And then on the 600, they've added the front pivot joint. You check that. So on the 10-hour stuff, this is stuff that you should be doing pretty much every day. You know, checking your engine oil levels, hydraulic fluid levels, check your wheel bolt torques, tire pressures, coolant levels. Make sure that the hoses for your air intake are good. Check that your PTO splines are good, nothing damaged there. 3-point linkages. Make sure that your parking brake actually works. Seat belt retractors, seat belt mounts. The horn, your safety interlock, which is if you were to get out of the cab without the brake set, it would shut the tractor off. If you get out of your seat while the tractor's running without the brake on, the tractor will shut off. If it's in gear when you get up, it'll shut off. And that's basically what the interlock system is. Make sure all your lights work. If you're placarded, make sure your safety signs are visible and aren't worn. Make sure the pedals are clean and where they're supposed to be. Check your loader and bob attach mounting system, and then your front differential fluid level. And that's pretty much stuff that you're doing on a constant basis anyway. Then as for 50-hour stuff, this is just the first 50 hours, not after that. But after the initial 50, you're just basically checking wheel bolt torque and greasing the machine. Now the front wheels, those are 24mm bolts, same with the back. Front ones need to be torqued to 168 to 186 foot-pounds. And then the rear ones need to be torqued to 275, between 275 and 319. So I'll get my torque wrench here and we'll give them a check. Now all mine were torque striped from the factory. I've never had these wheels off, and every time I check them, they're within spec. So I don't expect them to be any different this time, but it's still something that needs to be done. And I will check them here real quick and get right back. Okay, everything checked out fine again, so I'm in good shape there. The next thing you'll come to is your 100-hour items, which are basically checking your battery cables, checking the alternator and fan belt, which I'll show you here in a second, checking the parking brake free play, I'll show you that too, and then fuel lines, make sure they're good. And this tractor doesn't have a spark arrestor, but if you had one, you just pull that off, make sure that the chamber is empty, and then put it back on. So when it comes to the alternator belt, what you'll want to do is come around here. Is in mid-span here, you put 15 pounds of pressure here, and that should be 0.28 to 0.35 inches of free play here. So I'll grab a tape measure, I'll find a spot to pull a good measurement off of. I usually pick something that is at the same or 90-degree angle to what I'm pushing on, so that I get a accurate measurement here. So I'll probably pull it off the tire here and just come across, put what I think is about 15 foot-pounds of pressure on here, and see if we need to adjust it. If we do, we'll just loosen the bolt here, one down here, and we'll rotate it out, tighten it up. So be right back. All right, so I measured that, and it's over a quarter, but it's under a third of an inch. Just got a regular tape measure here and can't get completely accurate, but over a quarter is definitely okay, and under a third is okay. So that one's fine. But if I had to have adjusted it, this is a 10 millimeter and this is a 14 down here, and you just loosen those up, pry this out, and retighten them. So while I have the tape measure out, one thing that is nowhere in the owner's manual, and I'd be surprised if your dealership actually knew it, but the air conditioner belt tension, there's absolutely nowhere in the manual that talks about it, and I had to do a lot of research early on to figure it out. But for that belt, you do the same thing. You put 15 pounds of pressure on it and measure, and again, I'll probably come out here to the tire, and that is a 0.39 to 0.47 of an inch, so under half of an inch of deflection in that. So I'll give that a measure and see where I'm at on that. And then if I needed to tighten that, you come back over on the other side, and again, 14 millimeter, you loosen that jam nut, then loosen the inner nut, and loosen a nut back behind here, which is also a 14 millimeter, and then just tighten or loosen whatever you need to do on that. It's kind of odd that they don't have that called out anywhere, but every time I check the alternator, I like to check the air conditioner belt too. So as for that, once you check those, check your fuel lines, and get back over here yet again. If this thing had a spark arrestor on it, it would be on the end of the exhaust here, and there's usually a little hole drilled in them so that that spark arrestor can bolt on, and you'd pull that off, just make sure it's clean, and put it back on. So I'll check that AC belt real quick, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So that came in just under half an inch of deflection, which is right at the max allowed. I'm probably going to leave it for now, but if it gets any looser, I'll have to tighten that up. So the next thing will be changing the hydraulic and hydrostat and fuel filters. Now the hydraulic filter here is on the right hand side of the tractor under the cab, and this one's easy to get to, super simple to change. These do have a really strong magnet in them, so once you pull this filter off, the filter will want to stick to it, but you gotta try and be quick so you don't lose a whole lot of oil. So I'll get that one changed. I'll jump over to the other side, change the hydrostat, and then we'll jump up on the fuel filter. And I hate changing the fuel filter. That thing is a pain in the butt. But I'll get rolling here and see you in a minute. So I got that swapped out, and you can kind of see, let's see if you can tell how much oil I actually used. That's probably more than a couple quarts. I would say maybe 3, somewhere in there. So I'll have to top this system up when I get all done. But for the next one, I'll move around to the other side, and just under the left side of the cab, behind the fuel tank, is a hydrostat filter. And that one you don't lose hardly any oil on. The pedals have to be actually moved to get flow going, so when you pull that off, you just basically get the oil that's in the filter that drips out, and don't lose a whole lot. So I'll get that one swapped out, and then we'll see just how much I got to add to get it back up to full. Be back in a bit. Alright, that's installed. One thing you're going to want to watch out for is this O-ring. It doesn't want to come off with the filter. It likes to stick to the housing back there. And this happened to me one other time, and I didn't catch it. I put the new hydrostat filter on, fired the tractor up, and it was leaking. So I ended up pulling the filter off and finding out that it was double O-ringed because the old one hadn't come off. So just keep an eye out for that. Make sure that comes off with your filter. So now I'm going to come over here and change this fuel filter out. Now this isn't a horrible job if it was just the filter, but you've got this water separator here, and that is a pain in the butt. Huge pain in the butt. I just don't even want to do it because that's such a pain in the butt. What it is the threads on this filter are metal, and this water separator is plastic, and there's an O-ring in here that stays with the separator. And trying to get that plastic started on the metal threads, I mean, if you're off just a little bit, that metal just cuts that plastic, and it'll ruin the threads on that quicker than quick. And then when you get down to the O-ring, you really gotta put some muscle into it, and I'm always afraid it's gonna break. But the book says to take this off first, then the filter. But as you can see, there's all kinds of crap in here, and if you take this off, you just make a mess. So what I do is I disconnect the electrical part of it here, just disconnect it right here. I leave it on, and I take the whole filter off. And you're gonna lose some fuel just dripping out of it, but then that way I can take this over to the pan, dump it out, pull that off, and then try and get it on the new one. It's a lot cleaner way of doing it. So that's how I do it. And then I'll show you how to bleed it and prime it after I get this swapped out. So this is probably going to take me a little bit. So see you in a while. Well, good news. It wasn't as bad as normal. It only took me about 15 minutes to get that off and back on. But I was able to get it. So the next thing you'll do is you'll come up here, and right there is your breather vent. That's a 10 millimeter, so you'll just loosen that up, and you loosen it up enough that it can breathe. And then this is your plunger, and you just pump that. And you pump it, and slowly you can see fuel coming down into the water separator. And you just pump till that fills that up, and it'll get up and it'll start bleeding out this valve. And then you just simply screw it down, tighten it up, and you're good to go. So I'll get that knocked out, and we'll move on to the next thing. All right, I got that primed up, that tightened back down. You can see the bowl's full, filter's full. What I'll do next is top the hydraulic fluid off before I start this thing up. Make sure everything's good. So you come around on the back, and this is your dipstick. And there's a little bit on the very end, but I'm definitely going to have to add. So then you take this, is your fill port, take that out, put a funnel in there, and top it up. Now, I did dump this back into a jug that has measurements on it. I'm just shy of 1 gallon. So I'll be putting a gallon of this in there and firing it up and see where we're at. So I'll get that slapped in, start it up, and take another measurement. Well, I got that topped up. I put about a gallon in. I fired the tractor up. It fired up just fine, so no air bubbles in the fuel. And I shut it off, and I'll let it drain back down, and we'll check it and see how close we are. But one thing to keep in mind here is this little cutout here fills with dirt. So you want to make sure that this is good and clean before you pull this cap off, otherwise it just falls right in. And then this cap is plastic, which is a poor choice considering it's metal threads. So you got to be real careful with this, otherwise it'll want to cross thread and damage the plastic threads. There is the option of buying the aluminum version of this, and this is the same cap size as the engine oil filter fill is, and the engine oil filter fill is aluminum. So you could just buy one of those and replace this plastic piece of garbage. And I think I'll do that eventually if I can remember. Every time I go in I forget about it, but one of these days I'll get it. So with that, I did forget one thing on the 100 hour. I got distracted by telling you about the air conditioning belt, but I needed to check the free play on the brake pedals. So what you do is you push down the brake pedal till you feel resistance, and then what I do is I put a tape measure. I measure between here and here to see how much travel I've got, and then I'll do the same on the other side. And that's supposed to be 0.8 to 1.2 inches of free play. So just over 3/4 and just under 1.25 inches of free play. So I'll check that and see where we're at. But if I need to, a 14 millimeter, you break these jam nuts loose, and then you twist this in or out depending on which way you need to go. And this is a very delicate, so if you turn it just a little bit, it makes a huge difference out here. So let me measure that real quick and we'll see if we're in spec. Alright, I'm not sure how well this will come across on the camera, but just push down till I just start to feel resistance and then measure it. And when I measured both of them, they're right at 1 inch each. So that falls right in the middle of the spec, so we're good to go on that. But like I said, if I needed to, I'd adjust the left pedal on this side, and then you come over to this side for the right pedal. So as I push on that, you can see it move. So left and right. So we're good on that, and we'll jump over here and see what is next on the agenda. So just checking, we got the transmission hydrostat filters, we got the fuel filter. Now checking the air filter. So up front here is where your air filter sits, and you can see that mine's plenty dirty, but there's 3 keepers, and there'll be one on the back side here, and then you just pull this off and get you access to your air filter. So I'll get that checked and see if we need to replace it or not. Be right back. Okay, so one thing I want to show you guys is this thing was plenty dirty, but as you can see, you put it in there and the dirt still gets around this. And this tractor from the factory doesn't come with an inner filter, and so you can buy them from Bobcat, but they don't come with them, or at least this model doesn't. So I invested in that, and I think that was probably the best investment I could do, because as you can see kind of in there, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but you can definitely see that dirt gets around this, and that's going straight into your engine, which is no good, not at all. So I don't know why this design is this way. I know it's supposed to crush in there and really seat down, but as you can tell, it doesn't. So I'm gonna blow this out and clean it up and stick it back in. But without that inner, all that crap's going in your engine. So I highly recommend that. And I think it can read the part number here. It's a Donaldson, let me see. Looks like a P829332. So definitely worth the investment. So I'll get that cleaned up, and then we'll see, what do we got here? Just checking the coolant system hoses and clamps, hydraulic power steering hoses and clamps, air intake hoses and clamps, and then we'll get to the toe end. So I'll get all that checked and we'll do the toe end next. Okay, so I got everything checked and everything looks good. So the next step will be checking the toe end on the front end. So what I do is I take my tape measure, and on the tires there's a casting seam right in the middle. So I find that, I'll put that side right on it, and I'll come measure it on this side. And then I'll do it the same on the back side of the tire. And once you get those measurements, they're supposed to be 0.08 to 0.31 inches of toe in. So roughly 1/4 of an inch or so. And then if your toe in isn't proper, then what you'll do is you'll come up here, you break this jam nut loose, and you'll spin this tie rod in or out, and you'll want to do it equally on both sides so that you don't get one side that's way out and the other one not matching, and adjust it till you come within specs. Now every time I've done this, it's been spot on where it's supposed to be, so I'll find out if it still is, and I'll get right back. Okay, so I got the front and back checked, and if my eyeball is right, it's about 1/4 of an inch. So that's well within specs, as I expected it to be. So I won't be adjusting anything today, and that should wrap up everything on the 200 hour. We did everything on the 100 hour, we did everything on the 50 and the 10. So all that leaves is the 600 hour item, which is the front axle pivot. That's this guy right here. So if this was clean, you'd be able to see that there's a jam nut and then a bolt head. So what you do is you get a 22 millimeter, back this jam nut off, and then you tighten this bolt down till you felt it snug up, and then you'll back this off 1/6 of a turn, or basically one flat of the bolt, and then tighten this jam nut back down. Now they say to only do that if you are having vibrations in your front end, which I'm not, so I'm not going to mess with it right now. But if I were to have any kind of vibrations in the front, this is the adjustment that needs to be dealt with. So that pretty much wraps up the 600 hour. Not a terrible job. It is somewhat time consuming. I think I've been at this for probably close to 2 hours now. But that's about it. The next one, that service that I come up to, is going to be the 800 hour, which is more of a major service. You know, you're going to be doing pretty much all the same items, but then you're also going to be adding engine oil and then adjusting the valves on the engine. So that'll be a major one. But that pretty much wraps up the 600 hour on this. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.